What's going on, folks? Ted from Immersion here, and today I wanted to talk to you about something that I'm sure all of us have experienced, but I'm curious what your best examples are. Because we all play Dungeons & Dragons, there's a lot of things to know or possibly remember, or also to forget when it comes to Dungeons & Dragons. And I had an experience with that not that long ago, and something else recently happened. I don't actually remember what it was, but it made me want to make this video, which is all about stuff you forget, and we'll talk about that. But before we dive into that, I wanted to talk to you about a fun returning sponsor to today's video, and that is my good friend Phil Stone, who you may remember from these books, right? He sent me over his entire collection of these, and if you're unfamiliar with these books, like this is the Divination book, it is an entire series of illustrated spell books where it has all of the different spells for all of the different schools, as you can see here. Here's Mind Spike. But we can go over here and take a look. He currently has one for, I think this is the last book, which is for the Abjuration book. We covered the Enchantment book before. And yeah, you can see here there's all these different spells. I have some higher quality images of the art. We have Shield of Faith, Aid, Arcane Lock. You can see there's artwork and things here. So you could just basically take the book and walk away, and you'd have all of the Abjuration spells if you wanted. The Enchantment book, which is what we covered last time, is on the way to me right now. So that's a quick turnaround on that. There's 40 days left to go. You can see it as a goal of 500. It's already raised 8,000. So all it takes you to get PDF version of the book is $10, a soft cover version for $15, and a hardcover version for $25. And the Incantations Volume 1 covers Divination, Necromancy, Evocation, Conjuration, and Volume 2 is the latter for Illustration, Transmutation, Enchantment, and Abjuration. And you can see there's some more art and things here. And obviously you can use these as add-ons. And something else that I thought was interesting is Phil also had artwork for 8 of the cards in the Adventures of the Forgotten Realms Magic the Gathering set were produced by him, and he's got another 14 cards coming out in 2022. So that's pretty awesome as well. So thank you, Phil. Check out the work. It's awesome, awesome stuff. The artwork is fantastic. I love the black and white gritty style. It definitely reminds me more of old school RPGs. And it probably also helps a lot on the shipping. And these are just nice. They're not like a full-size D&D book either. You can take a quick look. You can see they're a little bit smaller. But either way, thank you, Phil, for sponsoring this video. So today, I wanted to talk to you about things you were convinced or you were not real or were not things in Dungeons & Dragons. We'll say specifically 5th edition, but you know, if you have ones from older editions, I'd love to hear it. And there are things that I mean, I've read all the books pretty much front to back at least once, probably multiple times after that, when, you know, checking up on things. And there are still things that to this day, I'm just like, that's not a thing. No, that doesn't exist. And I go and look it up and I'm like, oh, crap. How long? That's the whole time. Huh? Now, I will say you give everybody a little bit of a grain, take it with a grain of salt, as some things do get changed, right? We know that there is errata to the books. They're few and far between, but they have made substantial changes in some areas. For example, the change of the way long rest is handled for elves, with trance being sort of funky, hard to understand. You get the benefits of a rest, but not a long rest. It counts as sleep, but it doesn't, to basically just becoming a 4-hour long rest in the newer updated wording. The changing of the way the Beastmaster Ranger works to then allow the Beastmaster's Companion to have magical attacks. So those things have changed. Those are actual changes. So you might have remembered it one way, but then things changed because the book changed. But I'm going to show you an example of one, to me, that I still forget about. And that is this 8th level druid spell Tsunami. I thought it was real. Or didn't think it was real, rather. One of my players was like, I'm gonna cast Tsunami. And I was like, what? What spell? What? What book? Is that Elemental Evil? No. Tsunami is in the player's handbook and in the basic rules. And I have zero recollection of ever reading this spell description, anything. Now, this is an 8th level spell, right? So it's probably not something that's going to come across everybody's table all the time, because you've got to be 15th level to be able to even cast this spell. But yeah, this is a spell. I don't remember reading it. I don't think I've ever seen anybody in any streamed game or anything I've ever seen actually cast this spell. It just like it exists, and it was just never committed to my memory. And there was something, like I said, I can't remember exactly what it was. It was like a week ago, and I was just like, no, that's not real. And I went and looked up this ruling in the book. And I actually had a conversation with a friend of mine last night. We were just catching up on old D&D stories and stuff. And he was telling me about an idea for a campaign he was going to run. And I was like, oh, that you should take a look at the Mimic Colony in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. That sounds basically like what you're describing. It's a Mimic Colony. And he was just like, I don't even have a recollection that this whole chapter of Tasha's Cauldron of Everything is here, because what everybody focuses on in that book is all the player stuff, right? The spells, the new subclasses, but that latter chunk that's like DM related. And I think a lot of the time this is a poor example because this is the player's handbook, but it is still something that I didn't think was real. But like in Xanathar's and Tasha's, where they're like a player heavy resource, but they tack some DM stuff to the end. Like, I'm sure a lot of people don't remember that Xanathar's Guide to Everything has a rule about breaking down how many magical items a party should get over the course of 20 levels with an actual calculation for it. It just gets forgotten. The fact that I've found a lot of people didn't know that there were chase rules in the Dungeon Master's Guide. And some of that is maybe they just didn't know, but like I said, I've read the player's handbook, and this spell just eludes me. So I thought I would take a look at it, and you tell me if this rings any bells for any of you. So it is a 1 minute casting time, which might be why I've never seen anybody use it, because it takes a whole minute to cast. And it's concentration, but weirdly, it's only up to 6 rounds, which also makes me further believe that this spell, they just had no idea what they wanted to do with this. Because it's up to 6 rounds, so it's not even a minute, so, like, okay. A wall of water springs into existence at a point you choose within range. You can make the wall up to 300 feet long, 300 feet high, and 50 feet thick. It lasts for the duration, again, up to 6 rounds. When the wall disappears, when it appears, each creature within the area must make a strength saving throw. On a failed save, a creature takes 6d10 bludgeoning damage, or half on a success. At the start of each of your turn after the wall appears, the wall, along with any creatures in it, moves 50 feet away from you. Any huge or smaller creature inside the wall or whose space the wall enters when it moves must succeed on a strength saving throw or take 5d10 bludgeoning damage. Interesting that it was 6d10 for the initial, but the movement after the fact is now 5d10, so it drops by a d10 for some reason. A creature can take this damage only once per round. At the end of the turn, the wall's height is reduced by 50 feet, and the damage creatures take from the spell in subsequent rounds is reduced by a d10. I guess maybe that's what that's for. When the wall reaches 0 feet in height, the spell ends. A creature caught in the wall can move by swimming. Because of the force of the wave, though, they must make a strength athletics check against your spell save DC in order to move at all. If the check fails, it can't move. A creature that moves out of the area falls to the ground. It's just such a weird spell. Nothing about it rings true with any of the other spells in the player's handbook, or even anything designed since then. A full minute casting time, but it's clearly designed, it seems to be designed for combat, because the main function of it is that it does damage to creatures. It doesn't even say it does damage to objects. It says it does damage to creatures. So you'd have to somehow have a whole minute ahead of time to cast this Tsunami spell, which the range is sight, which is also a weird one. It's as far as you can see, so anywhere that your character has the visible capability to see, they can summon a Tsunami, which I don't know if any other spells have the range of sight. Usually it's like 120 feet, 500 feet, whatever it is, but sight, maybe, usually, but like even if it's like a range of 60 feet, it's like a point you can see within that, right? Where you can scroll down and look at Unseen Servant. It creates, within range, right? In an unoccupied space within range, right? Or an unoccupied space that you can see within range. This is as far as you can see. So, I mean, like, that's a little funky, because, like, on a big, clear day with a big open field and I'm on top of a mountain, I can see a long way away, but then how do we quantify sight? And then I summon this wall after a minute of casting, and then it moves away from me, which I guess... How does it move away from me? I assume it means this way, but like moving to the right or to the left or up or down. I guess it's really right or left is still away from me. And then it progressively proceeds to lose damage, height, and then eventually it just dissipates after 6 rounds. It's just so weird that it blew my mind when someone said they were going to cast it, because I had zero recollection of this spell. And I got to imagine that some of you out there have been experiencing this kind of thing in your time, where you're just like, huh, wait, that's a thing? And you go and look it up and you're like, no, that's not real. You're like, oh wow, yeah, I guess apparently that's how it works. I feel like it's right up there with the daylight spell, for example. Another great one that I might make a separate video on, because it just drives me up a freaking wall. But for example, folks, I don't know if you know this. This is another one of those funky ones like dark vision, how unless a spell that creates magical darkness specifically states that dark vision does not work in it, dark vision works in it. I don't know if you know that, but that's another weird one. That's just another funky rule. But like, did you know that the daylight spell doesn't specifically say that it makes sunlight, therefore it's not sunlight? It's another weird one. Again, future video topic, but yeah, nowhere in the spell daylight, it just says it makes light. Nowhere, bright light. Nowhere in there does it say that it makes sunlight. So it turns out casting a spell called daylight does not, in fact, hamper anything that suffers from sunlight sensitivity, because daylight is just light, not sunlight. I don't know. Those are kind of weird, wonky rule things that exist. But yeah, let me know. Is there something out there that you were convinced was just not a thing, and then lo and behold it was? Or you were convinced of something was 100% interpreted this way, and then you go and look it up and you're like, oh wow, that was totally wrong. Or I just completely forgot this was a thing. I want to hear the best stories in the comments down below. Hey, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, consider doing so. We're approaching that 80,000 mark, and I'd love to hit it by the time I land over in Gen Con, which I will also be there. So thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.